What's up, guys? Welcome to the Roadhouse. The name's Dalton. This might be a little bit of a long video today. I don't know. I'm just going to start rambling and kind of talking about how I feel, and we're just going to kind of see where it ends up. So, I've got a list here that I've put together. I'm sure other people can make many other examples, and I didn't go through the support gems, just the main skill gems and the spirit gems. But these are examples of things that I have listed down that extremely limit build diversity. I mean, if you look at different builds and you look at different creators, you'll see a lot of people saying like, oh, you didn't make this build, so-and-so made this build, yada, yada, yada. But that's not because this person didn't necessarily make that build and copy somebody else. It's because a lot of the builds in PoE 2 are just cookie cutter, and there's nothing you can really do about it. I mean, for example, if you play a monk, there's options. Of course, you could probably go something like Glacial Cascade, and I've seen people do Storm Wave, but these just aren't generally nearly as effective for quarterstaff as just playing something like Ice Strike or Tempest Flurry, incorporating the bell into it, incorporating charged staff, so you charge up your combo, drop the bell, do these big hits. It just generally works far better than everything else for monk. So when you see somebody come out with a monk build, a lot of the times it's just kind of cookie cutter, basic, not much to it. The same goes for most of these other weapon types. Now, let's get into some of the examples that I have here. Like heralds are martial weapons only, for example. So let's look at spirit gems. Go to heralds. So Herald of Ash, for example. While active, enemies you sufficiently overkill with non-herald attacks will cause an explosion that ignites nearby enemies based on the overkill damage dealt. Now, this requires a martial weapon, and it requires you to use an attack. Same for Herald of Ice. Attack hit, martial weapon. Herald of Thunder, attack hit, martial weapon. Now, Herald of Blood. While active, killing an enemy with blood loss will cause a bloody explosion that deals physical attack damage. This doesn't require a attack hit, but it requires a martial weapon. So even though it doesn't require an attack to hit, you could potentially use a spell. You still have to be using a martial weapon for this, meaning that wands, staffs, scepters, stuff like that would generally be making spells more powerful are off limits. Same for Herald of Plague. While active, killing a poisoned enemy spreads its poison to other enemies and has a chance to also hinder them. Nothing to do with attacks. All you have to do is poison an enemy. Everything's fine. But again, requires a martial weapon. So, like Herald of Plague, for example. Let's see. I've got this pulled up 2 months ago. Zizrin put out this video for a poison spell slinger. This build is a detonate dead of chain reaction build that just relies on poison. That's all it does. He's not scaling spell damage. He's using the detonate dead to spawn. He spawns many corpses, uses the chain reaction for a rapid explosions, bunch of small explosions, which stacks up many stacks of poison, and then that makes this build work. He's not running Herald of Agony on here, but he could if he wanted to. That's just an example of, you know, a spell build running poison that this would be perfectly fine as an option to run on if you wanted to. But if you had something like this in PoE 2, it's not an option. You can't do it because you require a martial weapon. Maybe that'll change if we get daggers for Shadow, and they have, like in PoE 1, spell daggers that are kind of more geared towards spell casting and stuff than actually attacking with them. That might alleviate some of this. But let's go to the next example. So, Wind Dancer also requires only martial weapon. I mean, it's just a buff. Something hits you, you send off a puff of air and everything gets pushed back. Why this requires a martial weapon, I'm not necessarily sure. I guess because they feel like you're taking your weapon and hitting the stuff away from you. I mean, why a powerful mage can't have this, shoot a puff of wind off to shoo everything away? I mean, I don't really get it, but yet again, just another restriction. So, Summon Raging Spirit requires a fire spell to trigger. We all know Summon Raging Spirit. Of course, generally, people always having to put down Flame Wall, which makes your screen absolutely atrocious. A lot of builds don't even want to use the Flame Wall. They're just using it to summon Raging Spirit. And I don't really get why we have to incorporate a fire spell to summon the Raging Spirits when generally you're going to be a minion build running this. You're not going to be a spell build, so you're not going to be scaling the spells, which is generally why people always use Wall of Flame or Firewall, because it provides a damage buff if you have projectile minions shooting through it. So it's pretty much the only real viable option. Mana Tempest and Sigil of Power. Both of these are spell only. So let's look at Mana Tempest. So you make this cloud of energy, and whenever you're in it, your spells get additional lightning damage and they split towards one additional target. This one, I kind of see why this one might be spell only, but you could easily just make this, add the lightning damage and empowered skills split towards one additional target, or projectiles maybe, and it would work fine. Now, this would maybe even be worse for attack builds because a lot of attack builds don't have a lot of mana regen and stuff. So they could use this for maybe a rapid damage spike, but it's going to eat through their mana potions, or they're going to need some form of mana leech or something like that to sustain, or else this is just going to absolutely tear through their mana and then they're going to have nothing left. And if you're not strong enough to kill a boss or something in that time, then you're going to be hurting. So having that restriction to be spell only is a little bit odd. Now, Sigil of Power is the exact same. Sigil of Power, you stand in it, you have to spend a portion of your mana, and then that gives you a buff. The buff on PoE 2 gives you 12% more spell damage per stage. So you have to spend mana, and then you get more spell damage in return. Now, again, let's look at the PoE 1 version of this. You can take Sigil of Power, put it on the ground, and it requires you to spend a total mana in there to gain a stage. And then whenever you gain a stage, it gives you lightning damage per stage. Just flat lightning damage. This works for attacks or spells. It doesn't matter. It's just a flat lightning damage. Now, this may be harder, yet again, to get to work with a attack build because it requires you to spend a large amount of mana to build up those stages. So you have to build an attack build very specifically, or have things that are costing a lot of your mana, maybe like some cock setup or, whatever, triggering certain other spells that are maybe even just utility spells or something, but they cost a decent amount of mana, and you have mana leech to restore that mana back. So with an attack build, you're potentially able to use this, put this down, build up stages, and get a huge spike of damage. That's, again, not possible in PoE 2. Restricted to spells only. So, next one. Rhoa mount. Spears and bows only. You're able to ride the Rhoa mount. Pull it up here. So you can ride this thing. Costs 60 spirit. And you can use a bow and a spear and mark skills. That's pretty much what you're restricted to. Why you can't be on this thing and cast a spell, I don't know. Why you can't shoot a crossbow, I don't know. It's just some odd, weird, unnecessary restriction, seemingly just because Mark and Jonathan have this thing where they're like, oh, it has to be extremely realistic. Like, we can't, use the salvaging bench to break down our glass bottles because that doesn't make any sense. But what does make sense to them is having to weapon swap in the middle of a battle and take your gigantic hammer and swap it over to some other thing so you can do a different skill and then move that away and pull back out your gigantic hammer. All of this makes perfect sense in battle. But doing stuff like casting a spell or using a crossbow while you're on a mount, nope, that doesn't make any sense. Can't allow it. So, Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod is a funny one because this one was extremely strong and didn't have that many issues. Actually, it was, I mean, a bit overpowered, which is why they nerfed it. But how they decided to nerf it was, again, just adding a weird restriction to it that just makes it unplayable for 99% of builds, unless you're running Lightning Arrow. So now the restriction that they have added to this is that the bursts of damage that come from chaining lightning to these rods now has a delay, and only Lightning Arrow skips that delay to make that chain happen faster for rapid explosions for strong damage. Now, again, weird, unnecessary restriction. They could have done many other things, like this can't be chained to by triggered spells and something like that, you know. That way it could get rid of some of like the ball lightning shenanigans, stuff that I understand was extremely strong. Or they could even give it like, you know, it even has a restriction on how it can be chained. So could have given this a cooldown maybe, or there's many different ways you could possibly solve this without giving it this weird restriction to where it only works with one other skill, really. Oh, the no shield skills with bucklers. Yeah, so shield charge, shield wall. I mean, this one I kind of understand. This one makes a little bit more sense because you're literally slamming your shield into the ground and bringing up these walls. But I mean, shield charge, you're just taking your shield and charging forward at somebody. I mean, does it really require a giant shield for that? We've been able to do this with bucklers and any type of shield in PoE 1 forever. Hexblast, if you read the patch notes or you know anything about this, generally the way people play Hexblast is that they'll take the Blasphemy aura, which you can socket a curse into, and it makes that curse an aura around you. So you could just be walking around with like temporal chains, and anything that gets in that is slowed. And then whenever they enter that and then they're cursed, you could cast Hexblast on them, exploding that curse and doing some damage. That's generally how people like to play stuff like Hexblast. You can't do that here because now they have this weird restriction where it has to have half of the curse duration to expire. So stuff like infinite curse duration, because technically they don't have a curse duration inside of your blasphemy. They're just cursed if they're in the aura and not if they're out. So because that has a infinite duration, you can't explode the hex on them, meaning that that entire playstyle that people enjoyed is pretty much just gone. Now you have to find some weird ways to curse them, wait for half the duration, probably have to do some extremely specific setups for like breakpoints on time. If this stuff even works, I don't know. I haven't fully looked into Hexblast since they decided to neuter it like this, but yeah, I mean, maybe some people are making it work, but I'm sure it's extremely jank and requires a lot of effort. Perfect Strike. Perfect Strike is another one. It requires a one or two-handed mace. Not exactly sure why this is mace required. This is something, I mean, you're literally just taking your weapon, you're waiting for the perfect time to strike, and then you hit to send out a wave of fire, which is caused by the magical skill gem imbued into it. Should have nothing to do with whether or not it's a mace. So why this wouldn't work with something like swords or axes or flails, I don't know. I can't really see any reason why. Like I said, I'm trying to be reasonable. Some of these I completely understand. Like Earth Shatter, you're slamming into the ground and causing gigantic spikes of ground to come up. You know, you're not really going to do that with a sword. That definitely seems something more like a mace skill. And like I said, shield wall, slamming your shield into the ground to bring these walls up. I get it. That's not something you're gonna do with a buckler. Like leap slam. Leap slam also requires a mace. You're just a big old guy jumping into the air and then trying to slam something down. In my opinion, that's going to be a lot harder to do with a gigantic fucking mace than it would be with a sword or an axe. Would it not? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're wanting to go in Mark and Jonathan's realistic territory of does this make some sort of sense? I mean, if I'm jumping with a gigantic fucking like 100-something-pound mace and with all of the fucking weight angled at the end of it, good fucking luck, dude. Why this can't be used with an axe or sword, I don't really understand. Yet again, an unnecessary restriction just built in just because. Ancestral warrior totem. I mean, if you look at shockwave totem, any martial weapon. Okay, makes sense. It uses its own weapon. Well, what's it matter if you have a mace or not? Makes sense to me. Perfect. And then you go down to ancestral warrior totem. Requires one-handed mace or two-handed mace. Why? It also uses its own two-handed mace. So this thing comes and has its own two-handed mace, and you can socket skills into it for it to use. But unless you yourself are wearing a two-handed mace, you can't use it. But it makes perfect sense for you to be maybe holding a sword, and then you take that sword, you put it on your back, you pull out your big old 150-pound mace, then you summon a totem, and then you put your mace back on, and then you pull back out your sword so you can do other stuff. All of this makes perfect sense. Completely. 100%. My main thing with crossbows, or why are crossbows required for grenades? I don't really get it. A lot of this other stuff, and traditionally, like ballistas, even in PoE 1, it's always been, you know, if you want to use a bow style ballista or something, you need to be wearing a bow. Kind of understand, just for mostly for scaling reasons and stuff. They just want you to stick with that weapon type. But again, I still feel like this might be laxed up a bit. But the main thing I'm concerned about is grenades. Like, why can't we be a ranger tossing grenades whenever we have our bow? Like, it's something attached to our clip. Like, what does grenades have to do exactly with crossbows? Like, if I want to be a, like, mercenary type warrior, like say swords come out, a lot of people I've seen have the fantasy of playing a like sword mercenary, you know, or maybe even like sword crossbow split, which again with weapon swaps would work for grenades if you wanted to. But maybe you just wanted to be a pure sword mercenary. Why can't you do that and be able to toss out grenades? I mean, it would fit the class fantasy very well. That I don't see any reason why these ball tactics or grenades in general have to be associated with crossbow. I've only got a couple of things for quarterstaff. A lot of this is like maybe stuff like falling thunder could be also incorporated. Like, I mean, I could see this being a mace skill even. Like, you know, you're slamming the ground and then like making these lightning crackles go everywhere. Seems perfectly suited to a mace to me, but we're stuck here with quarterstaff. But the main ones that I have noted are like Ice Strike, for example. Ice Strike
is a combo of 3 cold attacks.
It's just kind of 3 slow cold attacks generally. Once you get it faster, of course, it's different, but I mean, why wouldn't this necessarily work very well with like an axe or a sword? It's just kind of 3 ice imbued hits, and that's it. That's not much to it. Tempest Flurry is a little bit different. That's why I didn't add Tempest Flurry to my list. I kind of understand because, I mean, look.
Tempest Flurry is a combo of 4 lightning attacks.
It's 4 fast combos. They even have like the whole quarterstaff move where you're like spinning that shit like the Jedi kid from the old memes and stuff. But I mean, Ice Strike.
Ice Strike is a combo.
I mean, you literally just imbue your shit with ice and you just smack, smack, smack. It's not some complex like weaving a combo and doing all this shit. So why this also couldn't work for other melee weapons, I'm not exactly sure. Flicker Strike is one of my favorite examples because I love Flicker Strike in PoE 1. Anybody who's played Flicker Strike and loved it was hoping for it to be amazing in PoE 2. But it kind of is. It's all right in PoE 2, but it has its own issues. Again, quarterstaff only. In PoE 1, generally when people run Flicker Strike, it's with a sword. Why is it with a sword? Because the sword is what is easiest to get frenzy charges. In PoE 1, you need frenzy charges, not power charges to sustain Flicker Strike. So swords have, like, there's a couple unique swords that give you, like Terminus Est gives you a frenzy charge whenever you crit. Oro's Sacrifice gives you a frenzy charge whenever you ignite somebody, and it does pure fire damage, so it's easy to ignite. And there's a mastery on the passive tree for swords that gives you like an 8% chance to get a frenzy charge anytime you hit an enemy, or a unique enemy like a boss. So generally, when people are starting off playing Flicker Strike, they'll use a sword because that's what's easiest to sustain with. But when you get towards the end game, there are other options. You get a Feral's Fur, which lets you sustain frenzy charges. It's a chess piece that it swaps through these modes, and whenever it swaps, it gives you your max frenzy charges, which solves your sustain generally, and then you can move off of one of those weapons to something stronger. Now, when people do this, again, usually they still stick with swords because swords are still very strong. You can go pure crit with them and do a lot of damage, which is generally how you want to build Flicker Strike. But, I mean, I've done axe Flicker Strike builds where I'm not caring about crit. It's a lot cheaper. I don't need to invest in crit. You can spec into the node on the tree so that you can't crit, but you never miss. So you don't have to worry about crit. You don't have to worry about accuracy. Axe gets things like Onslaught for free on the passive tree, so you get increased movement speed base, increased attack speed base. They're just fairly strong in general as a early game kind of thing. And I've even gone with Mace Flicker Strike before. There's a unique mace in PoE 1 called Katava's Thirst that it lets it, whatever skill is socketed into that mace, deals splash damage to nearby enemies. Meaning that if I have a 6-link one of these maces and I put my Flicker Strike in there, I've essentially got a 7-link Flicker Strike that solves the problem of splash damage for AoE because it's already imbued in this mace, and I don't have to take one of my gem slots for it, which I can just use for something for more damage. And again, I don't have to worry about crit or accuracy because mace isn't very good for crit, so I'm not going to be worrying about that. So I'm just going to take the nodes that I can't crit, and I never miss. So again, huge build diversity options with just this one single skill. One single skill I've played so many different ways throughout the years. But if you're going to play Flicker Strike on PoE 1, or PoE 2, I mean, you're going to play quarterstaff. And that's it. But yeah, I could go on for days about Flicker Strike. Literally my favorite skill, and I wish we could do a little bit more with it. Last two things I want to talk about that kind of really limit some diversity is the fact that stat requirements are too high, and so are level requirements. So, I mean, some of these aren't too bad, like 66 for Flicker Strike. I mean, that's still fairly steep. Even though that's not a whole lot, that's the first level that you can get Flicker Strike at. So, again, even if we were able to use this with other weapon types like swords or axes or whatever, you couldn't really do it because you're going to have a lot of strength on that side of the tree and not much dex or int. So you can start speccing into this stuff, but then you lose stuff like being able to go titans for two-handed weapons, or giant's blood, I guess it's called. But yeah, you lose all of that stuff, and you can't really do it anymore because of stat requirements. And like again, going back to Flicker Strike, whenever this game very first came out, 0.1, I logged in and I wanted to play Flicker Strike. I was like, I don't care. I'm gonna play a fucking monk. I'm gonna play Flicker Strike. I'm gonna blast. I logged in and see that this thing requires level 52, and I was just kind of astounded, to be honest. You know, being a PoE player, I've played a lot of PoE. 52, I was like, okay, that's not that bad. I can get 52 quick as fuck. I'll get there. Let's just start blasting. Imagine my face whenever I realized that, I mean, yeah, just like PoE 1, 52 is pretty much towards almost the end of the entire story. So you have to beat basically the entire campaign before you get access to this skill, which for many casual players and people who, you know, haven't played PoE before, that's like 20 to 30 hours of playtime for them to be able to get to the skill that they want to play. Now, for comparison, in PoE 1, the highest level gem is 34, and the highest level support gems are 38. So, not only that, PoE 1 is a lot quicker to level, and the campaign is generally a lot shorter. So, you will get level 34 and be able to get the access to those gems. I mean, especially if you're an experienced player, you'll be there within like an hour or two, and you'll have whatever skill you want, access to whatever support gems you want. And I mean, even once you get to Act 6, you can buy literally every single gem from a vendor to try to experiment with. So yeah, why we have to start with these gems at like level 13 really makes no sense to me. It's way too late in the game. I get that they're trying to not overwhelm new players, and they're trying to like stagger these out a little bit so that way you kind of, you know, experience just a few at a time. But it's not really working, and people are already kind of, you know, punished for experimenting regardless, because you don't really, a lot of the times in the story, have enough support gems and skill gems to be able to just freely swap to whatever you want and try something out. And if you do try something out and you use all your support gems on it and stuff, and you don't really like it and it's not really working, okay, then now you don't have the skill gems and the support gems to try something else. So kind of gimps new players regardless. So having this be like way higher level doesn't make much sense. Well, hopefully this video didn't come across too negative. And the entire point of early access is for us to be able to provide feedback and them to be able to act on that, which is what's been happening and why there's been so many drastic changes and these large shifting patches. So I'm in no way a doomer. I'm hoping and I trust the GGG will have this game in a very good spot by the time 1.0 full final actual release is out. They're definitely listening. The community is definitely being very vocal with a lot of things. So we're heading in the right direction. We just need to keep doing our feedback. So quit yelling at GGG, quit calling them names, quit, you know, saying all this stupid shit about Jonathan. I get it. I get why people are mad, but we just need to settle down, keep providing our feedback, and keep trying to make this into the game that we want to see. And that's pretty much all we can do as players. If you haven't jumped into 0.2 yet, maybe go give it a try. Maybe do a new character through the campaign or something. The loot buffs are definitely noticeable, and it's feeling pretty good right now. I think we're heading in a good direction. So that's all I've got for this one. Hope you enjoyed me rambling. Peace.